Our last speaker on the main stage, everyone, and I want a big, warm round of applause, is going to be Ivett Ördög, who is the founder and facilitator of Lean Poker events. She is also an engineering manager at Contentful, and she has been a frequent speaker at software conferences around Europe. And yes, I just found the column where the speakers introduce themselves, and it's the last one. Big round of applause for Ivett, please.
Hello, Craft. How was the conference so far? Good? Okay, I need you to wake up. I know this is the last talk. How was the conference? Okay, much better, thank you. So let's talk about big refactors. Is it a good idea at all? I was thinking about this for a long time, and the reason I do that is because of quotes like this. This is Joel Spolsky, who talked about why Netscape failed and lost all of their user base. Who remembers Netscape, by the way? Okay, this audience is way too old. So Joel Spolsky said they did it by making the single worst strategic mistake that any software company can make. They decided to rewrite the code from scratch. So it seems like rewriting code is not a good idea. So is that true? Because what I see is that engineers keep rewriting code anyway. And some of these projects are actually successful. So what's going on? That kind of grinds my gears. Because one of the things about that Joel Spolsky quote is that it talks in absolutes. It doesn't really have nuance. And when I don't see nuance, I feel an Ivett Ördög talk lurking there. So where is the nuance? Let's talk about that. First, I'm going to talk about why do we consider rewrites a bad idea. And at this point, you will think that this is the BuzzFeed clickbait article of conference talks, because here you are trying to learn how to convince people about it, and I'm telling you you shouldn't do it. And then I'm going to show you a couple of case studies where rewrites were actually successful. And then we are going to talk about takeaways, why those particular projects were a good idea, what's the common theme, and what can we learn from that, and how can we actually turn that into a pitch, a business pitch, that explains business why that particular rewrite is a good idea. Okay, so actually, why do we consider rewrites a bad idea? So one of the things about talking last at the conference is you have to make the audience a bit more enthusiastic, but also that you get to reflect on previous speakers and you get to repeat slides that they had. So here we go with a repeat slide. The design stamina hypothesis. So this shows the investment over time versus cumulative features. If we do no design, then the hand-wavy pseudoscience is that you're going to slow down, and after a while, you won't be able to add any new features. End of the world, you are going to be irrelevant in the future. The other option is that you do good design. Problem is that to do good design, you actually have to spend a bunch of time at the beginning just designing things, and then as you have designed the architecture, then you suddenly start going really, really fast and becoming a rocket. Okay, so there is a line, a design payoff line, that says that if you have this many features, then it's worth doing design, and if you do less features, then it's not worth doing design. You are actually better off just hacking. That's great, although I wouldn't be able to tell where the design payoff line is. I guess it depends on the project. But there is also another concept called MVPs. And by MVP, I don't mean Magyar Vasúttörténeti Park, which is our venue, but minimum viable products. Sorry. Let's go back. Come on. All right. So the minimum viable product is the smallest increment you can have that can prove that you are able to sell this product. You are able to make money with the idea that you have. And this is a very important concept because when it comes to a startup, come on, all right. And then that's twice. So when it comes to a startup, what you have is this is where you already have your minimum viable product. And this is the amount of investment you have if you build it with no design and if you build it with design. What happens is that your initial investment risk, the money that business has to pump into the project, is much, much bigger. And likely, that project is going to fail. So you want to minimize that initial investment risk. That's a really important thing to minimize. So that's why every successful company has legacy code, because initially, the best idea is to just hack away. Now, of course, on the long run, someone who had good design might take you over, and that would be bad. So the idea would be is that you, at some point, once you have your product market fit, you start redesigning your product and improve the design so that you get back to almost the same curve as you would have had with a good design. So now you are saying, isn't that a rewrite? Isn't that arguing for a rewrite? And yes, in some cases, but note that you might do that without a rewrite. You could do that with an incremental refactor. So for the kind of refactors and rewrites I'm talking about, these are big projects. Things that you cannot do in a few hours or few days. Something that you can do by just secretly doing and not telling business. Because this is the kind of refactor where you have to spend a lot of time and investment, and business would notice that you are not doing what they asked you to do. So yeah, it could be a rewrite, but not necessarily. But there is one more thing that's important here. I would like to switch cumulative features to product attractiveness, because I think it's a much more useful term. Because we don't care about how many features you have, right? If I can delete half the features and my product becomes better, that's just as good. So I think product attractiveness is a much more important measure here. And the same design stubborn hypothesis, since it's pseudoscience and hypothesis, it basically works just as well. And it aligns with our intuition. And why do I want to emphasize this? The reason I want to emphasize it is something I learned from doing these Lean Poker events that was previously mentioned. So Lean Poker is an event where different developer teams get together. Each team has their own poker bot that starts out really dumb and doesn't do anything useful, just folds. And then you get to improve it. And over the 8 hours that you are working on it, those little black dots are the deployments. So you're going to deploy every few minutes, really quickly. And in the meantime, the games are running. This is basically some kind of an analogy for the business world, where you actually, as long as your product is slightly better than the competition, you're going to gain customers. If your product is slightly worse than the competition, you're going to lose customers. So it's not just the amount of product attractiveness that matters. What matters is how much more attractive your product is than the competition. Because as long as your product is more attractive, you're going to gain more customers, and you're going to take away customers from your competition. Otherwise, they are going to take away your customers, and they are going to grow faster than you. So really, the difference matters, and that's true for Lean Poker as well. OK, so having said that, what happens if we have a product that is already making money, and then we do a rewrite? We start a rewrite. What happens is that our competition, who started out somewhat worse than us, since we are not delivering any new value, any new attractiveness to our product, they are going to take us over. And this is what happened to Netscape, right? At the time, Internet Explorer, oh my God, Internet Explorer was more attractive than anything, seriously. But at the time, it was more attractive, and people shifted to Internet Explorer. And what happens is that right there, this is where a responsible business person will shut down your rewrite project. Because what happens is they start losing customers, and they are saying, oh my God, it was a really bad idea to start this big rewrite project. I'm going to shut this down, because otherwise, our business is going to fail. What happens after that? Well, you lost time. Your code is not any better. Worst case scenario, you were working in a branch, and you just deleted the branch, and you're back with the old crappy code base that you had. Even worst case scenario, you're halfway through, and it's even worse than it ever was. So all we did was start a rewrite and lose time, and make things even worse if possible. All right. So what's the implicit assumption here? What is it that I didn't say, but I should have about these rewrite projects? And the clue is, and we are going to go through these case studies, and I want you to think about what's the pattern. What is it that all of these projects have in common that I didn't assume with the previous arguments? So let's talk about actual case studies. These are coming from companies I worked at, from companies I never worked at but heard a lot about, and stuff like that. So let's start with the first one, and yeah, the abandoned platform. So this is actually one of the sponsors, Prezi. They had a problem. ActionScript. Who remembers ActionScript? Yeah, a good many of you. So that was, of course, something really hip at the time when they created Prezi. And then came Steve Jobs and said, ActionScript is dead. ActionScript was actually dead a couple of years later. But Prezi was built on ActionScript. And they had no way to continue their product without rewriting it. Now, the interesting thing is that that project went on for a long time before, at some point, the business decided to release a new version to Prezi, which had less features than the previous one, but was built on JavaScript. And then they basically had two products competing with each other at the same time. Interesting. And by now, I think Prezi Classic is dead, and maybe it was called Prezi Next for a while, but now that's Prezi, right? So there is an interesting success story, although it didn't start out as a success. Then the catastrophic failure. So that was actually a project that I was working on. We had an interesting product that was oh, what happened? I got trapped. Okay, so that was a product that you could actually set up workflows for your marketing campaign. So you could say that if someone registers, I want to send them an email, and if they didn't click in the email, I wanted to send another email, and then if they clicked and bought something, then I'm going to send them a coupon, whatever. You could just create a graph of events that would then be executed by us. The problem was that it wasn't really built with microservices in mind. It was part of a monolith. And as microservices were introduced, the whole thing started to fail catastrophically, like causing millions of euros of damage. No, not millions, but thousands of euros of damage over time. And we really had to fix that. And the only way we could fix it is by going through and meticulously change every piece of code that didn't expect a microservice to fail. But what's interesting there is that what we did is we created a monitoring that would tell us what areas of the code generated the catastrophic failures, And we started with the one that was causing the most trouble. And then we went on to the next one and the next one. And every time, every time we fixed one area, suddenly our error rate dropped significantly. And that was good because the business was like crazy happy. Oh, now it's not thousands of euros, it's just hundreds. That's okay. It's fine. Okay, we fixed the rest of it, but you get it. They immediately got value back. Next story. That's also my own project. So here we had a daily import job that at some point started to run for 25 hours. It's fairly rare, although it does happen, that a day consists of 25 hours. Kudos to you, to those of you who know when a day is 25 hours. But obviously that doesn't work in general. So how can we fix that? The way we did it is that we started out by looking at which customers have the most trouble. And then we looked at that customer's import settings. It is a very specific set of settings. And we said, all right, we can do this with a single SQL query. And that SQL query runs in less than 5 minutes. The same thing that was 25 hours is now 5 minutes for the customer who is hurting most. And then we did basically a service that would decide, are we using our old code or are we using this beautiful new code that has a single feature, none of the other clunky stuff, just this single feature. And if our service could support that single setting that the customer had, then it would go to the new code. Otherwise, it would go to the old code. And suddenly, our biggest problem was gone. The biggest customer that had 25 hours of import suddenly had 5 minutes, and we were down to 12 hours worst case. And then we looked at, okay, what's that 12 hours? Who is doing that, and what are their settings? And we did that with a SQL query as well. And then we gradually, incrementally, included all of the features from our original import service, every time creating value for some customers. As I said, as the last talk of the day, I get to reference previous talks. So that was a talk from yesterday from Shopify. Kristen Basteinder made it and did it, and it was a really good talk about how Shopify went from a monolithic big ball of mud to a componentized monolith. And one of the things that they did was, well, multiple things. One, they basically made it so that every single step of the way, whatever they already did was already in the main line. They already had the components around. They didn't separate yet. The code wasn't necessarily enforcing componentization, but they built tools to find out how far they are. And they created a competition about it. So again, somehow we had some value up front. As they were going along, it was easier and easier to work in the code base. And then I have another story where a company decided that their product is really good, customers love it, but we need to make it a platform. We need to make it sure that outside developers can contribute to our code. How can we do that? Well, our API is really messy. No one would understand it unless they are working at our company. And of course, we would be ashamed to just show people how horrible our internal APIs are. So we need to find a way to clean that up. And one way you could do that is by saying, okay, we are cleaning up the code, but as we are cleaning it up, the parts that are clean, we are going to make that a public API. And every time my code got better for the internal developers, it got better for the customers as well. And customers loved it. And customers gave feedback to the company that, oh, your new API endpoints are really useful because we can do this and that with that. And they build software around it. So suddenly, you have customers giving good feedback about something that was originally meant to be an internal refactor. And that was really interesting because for a while, this project was on the table. And the time when the business decided that we should do it is when we could argue that, yeah, so if you want this to be a platform, we can have to do this internal refactor. And we can regularly make those internal improvements visible to our customers and become a platform. Last one. Who uses VS Code? Yeah, so interesting story. VS Code was rewritten from scratch after they, although they had Visual Studio. Like Microsoft had Visual Studio, and they decided to write a completely new product. Why? The reason is because at the time, among web developers, Microsoft used to be not really a good name, right? We were like not liking Microsoft, let's just say the least. Of course, Internet Explorer didn't do a good job of advertising Microsoft to us, so that might be the reason. But they wanted to reach us. They wanted to reach you, this audience, actually. And they decided to rewrite it from scratch. The reason they did it is because the way Visual Studio was set up was not really compatible with a web developer workflow. And they had to rethink the whole thing. That was one reason. The other reason was that that they wrote it in Node.js, and basically they had the advantage of the huge library that is available for Node.js. But what they did, they created a competition for themselves. Instead of just saying that, okay, we have this product, we are happy with it, and we are going to improve it all the time, they said, what if someone came around and built something simpler and better for these folks? Then we would never be able to enter that market. So how about we are the ones who are creating this new product? How about we are the company that could be our competitor? And it worked out. So, takeaways. What is the implicit assumption here? There are actually two. And if someone wants to shout out one, I'm willing to listen. Okay, so one implicit assumption is that during the rewrite, we don't deliver value to the business. Because all the slides that I showed you with the design summary hypothesis, all of them assumed that while we are rewriting, we are not delivering value. That's one thing. The other thing is that the rewrite is an all or nothing project. Because what I said, after we start rewrite, the competition takes over, and business is going to shut it down, and we are back at square one. But that's not necessarily true. You can do a rewrite or a refactor without having to go back all the way to your old code base and throw away all the work that you had. Okay, so these are the two implicit assumptions. And I think this is important because when you think about a rewrite project, I think that thinking about these two ideas is important. One, going back for a second, one, are we delivering value incrementally? Can I make this refactor in a way that even when we are not ready, we still made either the customer's life better, or maybe, that's not as good, but maybe our developers' lives better, right? Customers is the best because, after all, they are paying us. I know capitalism is horrible, but that's the thing. So the other thing is that you should ask yourself, is it switching? Yeah. Is that what happens if they shut my rewrite project down? Would I be better off or worse off if I had to stop midway through? Because if you would be better off stopping midway through, I would say that you can even try rewriting. You can even just spend some time on it and see if it is actually delivering the value that you are expecting. If doing that rewrite and you start it and you don't get value out of it, and you actually, if you stop, then you're worse off, abandon it. Don't do it. No way. You have to be very careful to not waste time. You should make sure that even if it's just halfway through, you actually delivered something useful. Okay. So this is not just the first principle of the Agile Manifesto, which you should always remember, but also the tagline for my business, which is a consulting business. And of course, the Lean Poker workshops, same tagline. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. This is so important, and this is what it comes down to, right? If this holds true for my rewrite project, I'm good. If I'm delivering value while I'm rewriting, I'm good. If I'm not delivering while I'm rewriting, then I'm back at the slides that I showed you in the beginning with the doomsday scenario where our competition takes over. So there were basically two important groups of these rewrite projects that were successful. One is creating your own competition. This is what happened to Prezi. This is what happened to Microsoft's VS Code, where you just say, okay, I hit a dead end. I cannot address that new market, or I cannot even keep my existing market unless I do a rewrite. And if someone came along, what would happen if someone came along and built the same product as I did? Well, not necessarily the same product. Actually, if you ever rewrite a product, make it different. Learn from your existing mistakes. When you create that new product, it should be a different product addressing the same problem, but much better. And basically, there you are just creating a competition for yourself, waiting for the competition to take off, take over, and then you discontinue your old product if you think it's worth it. Sometimes it's worth keeping it around. Some companies actually do that. I don't remember the name of that company, but there is an issue management software, which is not Jira, because then I would remember it. But one of these issue management softwares actually has 3 different versions running in parallel, and you can choose whichever. Of course, new customers will choose the new one, but older ones may not want to migrate to the new one. Okay, so that's one group. The other group that's interesting is the incremental replacement with user value. So in these cases, and actually, the Shopify case kind of falls here, but not exactly, because it's delivering value to the developers. But all of these 3 cases, the catastrophic failure, the slow import, and the becoming a platform case, in all of these cases, our mission was to create user value. And to do that, for that, the rewrite was a tool. Even though we might have the idea for the rewrite before we knew what the user value was going to be, once you find what the user value can be, then you can use your rewrite as a tool for that user value that you are trying to deliver. And that was my talk. I'm a bit early, but I guess all of you are really tired, so thank you for your attention.
But if we finish early, that means we have questions. You okay to answer a few, Ivett?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay, so the first one, nice and passive-aggressive, wasn't the biggest driver for IE's success that it was the default browser shipped with Windows, for which Microsoft was fined a few years later?
Yeah, that was part of it. That definitely was a part of it, but remember that Microsoft wasn't investing too much into Internet Explorer. That's why it was so crappy, by the way. So Netscape could have easily kept their user base if they were becoming better and better and actually delivering value that was interesting for the customer. By the time they finished rewrite and released Mozilla, which was actually the rewrite of Netscape, Mozilla was successful. Mozilla took over Internet Explorer, or well, didn't take over, but had a significant market share. And they could have saved that market share without first going bankrupt. So yes, that Microsoft thing was a big part of it, but not the entire story.
A far more popular question is, how can an engineering team sell a refactor to the management?
Yes, so basically what you want to do, so you shouldn't sell the refactor, you should sell the user value. And that was kind of the point of this talk, that you should think of, okay, why do I want to make this refactor? And your most likely candidate, by the way, is platformization. So if you think that it's really hard to work with this code base, that means that it's also impossible for outside developers to contribute to your code base by writing outside services, right? And once you think about, okay, how could this be a platform? How could we make sure that we as a company are not relying on just on our developers to make this product better, but how can we outsource it in the sense that different companies pop up, different startups, they build something on our platform and become successful. So then what you can sell to the management is that you say, hey, listen, our code base currently is not really good in good shape. But what if we could make this, what if we could refactor it or rewrite it in a way that allows us to create APIs that other businesses can use to build their own products on our platform, making our platform even more sticky. And remember this word, stickiness. If a product is sticky, that's good. That means that whoever started using it is unlikely to leave. And the more ecosystem you have around the product, the stickier that product is. So try to sell this idea. That's one option. But of course, think of the use cases that we had. What was the user value? What was the value to the business that all of those case studies delivered? And then try to make a pitch based on that.
The next one, did you already answer this in a way with the first question? Is secretly refactor the only option? How else can this be justified to those who speak the language of money and features? You kind of answered that with the first question, no?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on. But I like that. Speak the language of money and features. Boo. Is the common thing in cases that they gave value to the customers during the refactor process?
Yes, you got it right.
Good answer. The next one, not sure if it's a question or of a point. Benefits of a good design. Assume that the design will be good from the first attempt. Those moving and failing faster might discover good design earlier. Also good answer.
Yeah, okay, so yes, that's kind of true. If you are moving fast and you are hacky at the first iteration, but you have very experienced developers who early on notice what are the design problems as the system grows, you can actually get away without a rewrite. Because what you can do is just look at those emerging patterns of bad code and incrementally fix them without ever telling management, right? That's the best case scenario. The problem is that sometimes you get to the point where it's not an option anymore, where just incrementally fixing is really, really hard. Actually, before yesterday, I would have said that it's impossible to incrementally fix a big problem. Watch Christine Westeiner's talk if you haven't. I guess the recording will be out, because she convinced me that it's possible, but it's a really interesting example.
Next one. How do you decide when your originally good design got out of date and you need to rewrite?
Yeah, I think that, so here's the thing. Developers usually early on notice that there is a problem, right? It's always the developers who start complaining about bad design. But they might be too early to shout for a rewrite, or maybe that rewrite is not really necessary, because sometimes there is another way you can fix the problem. Just make sure that that legacy part of the code is something that you rarely touch, and it's relatively stable, so that you don't really have to touch it. Then bad design is not such a big problem, right? That's also a way around it. But in the end, I think when you need to do a rewrite is when you can prove that there is user value behind that rewrite. And all of the cases I mentioned are examples of that.
Okay, a question from somebody with a name, specifically Peter, who asks, or says, kind of both, developer dissatisfaction wasn't listed as a good argument. Is it not considered a good stroke the best strategy, or does it just not carry weight?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that it should carry weight. In most organizations, I think the problem has to be huge to actually be a good argument. If your business is losing developers at a large pace, and most of those developers say at the exit interview that the reason they are leaving is because they are fed up with this damn code, and it's impossible to work in it, and it's demotivating, or the half-year reviews of the company, like this developer satisfaction survey or whatever your company does, if in that it turns up over and over and over again that the code quality is horrible and we have to do something about it, then it might become a good reason to change.
Last question. Isn't it an implicit assumption that every refactor adds value? What if not?
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason I think this is a good framework, because some refactors might actually not add value, and if you can't argue that it is adding value, at least developer value, measurable developer value, as in the Shopify case, if it's not doing that, then if you can't argue for that, then maybe your refactor is not necessary. Just maybe.
Who wants to make me read this? Michael? X : equals deliver value during rewrite, semicolon Y : equals selective rewrite, period. Space, you showed success for X and Y, open parenthesis, I.E.1 of 4 quadrants, close parentheses, period. Do you know of success of other 3? Haha, great question. I think we all know the answer to that one.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. Yeah, you showed success for X and Y. Yeah, okay. I can give you an example. Maybe there are. And if you know about any of those successful projects that fall on the other 3 quadrants, find me, because I want to hear about it and I want to add it to my talk.
That's the best answer to any question ever. Huge round of applause for Ivett, please.
Thank you so much.